General Orvax of the Caltherian Empire stood at the edge of the light. His scaled brow furrowed as his golden eyes swept over the assembled counselors. The room's ambient glow reflected off his battle-worn armor, accentuating the scars across his face. Remnants of battles fought across the galaxy. "I speak not as a diplomat," Orvax began, his deep voice reverberating, "but as a soldier who has studied the art of war longer than some of you have been alive. The species you wish to conscript into this alliance, humans, are not what you think they are." Counselor Wazel, a towering insectoid figure with iridescent wings that shimmered with every movement, clicked his mandibles dismissively. "The humans are a young race. Primitive. Their technology barely scratches the surface of galactic standards. They will fall in line like the others." Orvax's gaze sharpened. "That is precisely why they are dangerous. Their weakness, their unpredictability. These are their weapons. They do not fight like us, nor do they think like us. I have studied their history, their wars. They do not merely defeat enemies. They annihilate them." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Dozens of counselors, each representing a different race, exchanged skeptical glances. The holographic map shifted, zooming in on a region near the Sol system. A small blue-green planet glimmered at its center. Orvax continued, his voice rising. "When the Caltrek swarm descended on the Zoltari worlds, it was humans who intervened, not out of allegiance but out of defiance. They turned the tide of that battle with ingenuity we could not predict. You think you can force them to join us against the swarm? You will not find allies. You will find a weapon that you cannot control." Counselor Wazel leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. "Enough of this fear-mongering, General. The humans lack the resources, the fleet strength, even the understanding of our ways. They have no choice but to submit. Their system will fall to the swarm without us." Orvax's claws curled into fists. "You underestimate them at your peril. Have you forgotten the Battle of Kareth Prime? The Council's forces outnumbered the human fleet 5-1, yet they turned our own strategies against us. Their unpredictability is not a flaw. It is their greatest strength." A silence settled over the hall, broken only by the software of the holographic display. Orvax straightened, his broad shoulders tense. "Mark my words. If you corner them, they will not yield. And if you provoke them, they will not forgive." Counselor Wazel rose from his seat, his wings buzzing faintly. "We are not here to entertain the warnings of a general too cautious to act. The Council has already decided. Humanity will be given an ultimatum. Join the Alliance or face the consequences." Orvax opened his mouth to respond, but stopped as the hologram flickered. A distorted signal cut through the display, warping the map into static before stabilizing. An unfamiliar pattern of symbols and frequencies scrolled across the projection. Gasps erupted from the assembly as they realized what it was. "The swarm," a voice whispered, trembling. Orvax's jaw tightened. "How close?" A council aide, a nervous feline-like being, scrambled to interpret the data. "It's near the Sol system, but their movements are erratic, unlike their usual tactics." Wazel waved a dismissive hand. "Irrelevant. The humans will serve as bait, drawing the swarm away from our core systems. We'll deal with them once the enemy has been weakened." Orvax took a step forward, his voice a low growl. "You would sacrifice an entire species to save yourselves?" The counselor's tone turned icy. "This is not a negotiation, General. The Council's will is final." The General's gaze lingered on the hologram, the red markers inching closer to Earth. He could see it already. Humanity caught between two predators, forced to choose between submission and extinction. But in his gut, he knew they would choose neither. "You're making a mistake," Orvax said quietly. "One that will cost you everything." Without another word, he turned and strode from the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the uneasy silence. As the massive doors closed behind him, the counselors resumed their discussion, voices rising in heated debate. Wazel's voice cut through the noise, sharp and commanding. Prepare the ultimatum. Humanity will kneel. In the corridor outside, Orvax paused, his claws scraping against the metallic wall. A lifetime of battle had taught him to recognize the calm before a storm. He had seen enough to know that once unleashed, humanity's wrath would be like nothing the galaxy had ever faced. A faint vibration hummed through the station's structure, and Orvax glanced at the viewport, where the stars glittered coldly against the void. Somewhere out there, the swarm was advancing, and somewhere on that small, defiant world, humanity was preparing, unknowingly, perhaps but inexorably, for the fight of their lives. The general's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible even to himself. They should have listened. Beneath the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains, buried deep within the Earth's crust, the command center of the United Earth Alliance thrummed with subdued urgency. Monitors flickered with streams of data, and the air was alive with the low hum of machinery. The tension in the room was almost palpable as Phil Calloway, the grizzled strategist at the heart of humanity's defense, studied the incoming transmission. His eyes, gray as storm clouds, narrowed as the holographic image of Counselor Wazel materialized in front of him. "Humans of Earth," the insectoid figure began, his voice an unsettling mix of chittering clicks and synthetic translation. "The Galactic Council has deemed your isolation unsustainable. You will join our alliance against the Caltrek swarm or face eradication. The choice is yours." The message ended abruptly, leaving the room in heavy silence. Phil leaned forward, his fingers steepled as he processed the implications. At his side, Dr. Charlie Lowell adjusted his glasses, his sharp, restless mind already working through possible scenarios. Charlie's brilliance in adaptive AI and weapon systems had earned him both admiration and unease among his peers. But in this moment, he seemed more human than genius, his lips pressed into a thin line of apprehension. "They expect us to roll over," Charlie said finally, breaking the silence. His tone carried a mix of incredulity and bitterness. "They think we're just another primitive species desperate for protection." Phil's voice was calm, but edged with steel. "They don't understand us. That's their mistake." Across the room, Captain Ryan Grant paced like a caged predator. The youngest of the trio, Ryan was a fighter pilot known for his hot-headedness as much as his skill. His dark eyes flashed with anger as he turned to Phil. "You're not seriously considering this, are you? Joining their alliance? They'll use us as cannon fodder. And when we're no longer useful, they'll cast us aside." Phil met Ryan's gaze, his expression unreadable. "No, I'm not considering it. But this isn't just about defiance. We need to be smart. If we're going to survive, we have to prepare for a fight on multiple fronts." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their reality. Humanity was outnumbered, outgunned, and caught between two unstoppable forces, the Council and the Swarm. But Phil knew that desperation had a way of forging strength, and humans had always been at their best with their backs against the wall. "Charlie," Phil said, turning to the scientist, "what do we have in development?" Charlie hesitated, then pulled up a schematic on the central display. A web of interconnected satellites filled the screen, their positions forming a global defensive grid. "Project Umbra," he said, his voice carrying a mix of pride and uncertainty. A network of AI-driven satellites capable of targeting and neutralizing enemy ships before they enter the atmosphere. It's still in testing, but if we can get it operational, then we've got a fighting chance, Phil finished. He studied the schematic for a long moment before looking at Charlie. "How long do you need?" Charlie rubbed the back of his neck, calculating. "Weeks, maybe months, if I'm being honest. But if the Council or the Swarm attack before we're ready, we'll make sure they don't," Phil said firmly. "Ryan, assemble a recon squad. I want eyes on the Council fleet. If they so much as flinch in our direction, I want to know about it." Ryan nodded, already moving toward the exit. "I'll be ready in an hour." As the captain disappeared into the corridors of the bunker, Charlie leaned closer to Phil. "You're putting a lot of faith in something we can't guarantee will work." "I'm putting faith in us," Phil replied. "We've faced impossible odds before. This time is no different." But it was different, and they both knew it. The swarm was unlike any enemy humanity had encountered. A hive mind species that adapted to every strategy and overwhelmed entire civilizations. And the Council's ultimatum had stripped them of the luxury of time. Yet Phil's resolve never wavered. He had spent his life studying wars, learning from humanity's darkest moments and brightest triumphs. If there was a way to survive this, he would find it. The tension in the command center only grew as reports began filtering in from the outer system. The Council fleet had been detected near the asteroid belt, its movements deliberate and methodical. But there was something else. Anomalies in the fleet's trajectory that suggested another force was at play. Phil studied the data with a growing sense of unease. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Charlie peered over his shoulder. "What doesn't?" Phil pointed to the screen. "The fleet's formation. It's not defensive, but it's not aggressive either. It's almost as if they're being herded." "Herded by what?" Charlie asked, his voice tinged with dread. Before Phil could respond, an alarm blared, and the holographic display shifted to a new feed. A massive distortion rippled through the outer edges of the system, followed by the emergence of dozens, no, hundreds, of alien ships. The swarm. The command center erupted into chaos. Orders were shouted. Data streams flooded the monitors, and the faint hum of the bunker grew into a deafening roar of activity. Phil stood at the center of it all, his mind racing. The swarm had arrived, and the Council fleet was in disarray, caught off guard by the sudden attack. "We need to act now," Charlie said urgently. "If the swarm breaches the asteroid belt, Earth will be next." Phil's jaw tightened. "Send out a warning to all stations. Begin evacuation protocols for the outer colonies. And activate every contingency we've got. No one is going down without a fight." Charlie hesitated, his expression torn. "What about Umbra? If we divert resources to—" "We don't have a choice," Phil snapped. "If Umbra isn't operational by the time they reach us, it won't matter how prepared we are." The scientist nodded, his resolve hardening. He turned back to his console, his fingers flying over the controls as he initiated the satellite grid's final testing phase. Phil watched him for a moment before shifting his focus to the looming threat on the screen. This was it. The moment they had dreaded, the moment they had prepared for. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, Phil felt a flicker of hope. Humanity had always thrived on the impossible, and if there was one thing he knew, it was that survival wasn't just a matter of strength. It was a matter of will. As the first reports of the swarm's advance came through, Phil allowed himself one brief, steadying breath. Then he spoke, his voice calm and phoenix. "We fight on our terms." The void of space erupted in flashes of light as humanity's fleet emerged from the shadow of Jupiter's moons, their sleek ships gliding silently toward the chaos unfolding at the edge of the solar system. The swarm was here. Dozens of organic, insect-like vessels twisted and darted in coordinated patterns, overwhelming the fractured remnants of the Galactic Council's fleet. Earth's ships, smaller but bristling with cutting-edge modifications, accelerated toward the fray. In the command carrier Phoenix, Phil Calloway stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. The vast display screens projected the battle in sharp detail. Swarm ships tearing through Council frigates with terrifying precision. His crew worked in disciplined silence, their fear buried beneath layers of training and duty. Phil's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Status report." Lieutenant Harris, a wiry young man with sharp features, responded immediately. "All ships are in formation, sir. Recon confirms swarm vessels are engaging Council forces at grid point Delta 12. Council fleet strength is down by 30%. Phil's gray eyes hardened. The Council had sent their fleet to Earth as a show of force. Yet here they were, outmaneuvered and overrun. "And the swarm's movements?" he asked. Harris hesitated, glancing at his console. "Erratic, sir. They're adapting faster than expected. Their primary force is bypassing the Council entirely." It's heading straight for Earth. The weight of those words settled over the bridge like a shroud. Phil's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. Order all ships to intercept. Focus fire on their vanguard. We need to slow them down. From the comm station, Captain Ryan Grant's voice crackled through. Phil, this is insane. We're outnumbered 10-1. If we get between them and Earth. That's exactly what we're going to do, Phil interrupted. We don't need to win this fight, Ryan. We just need to hold the line long enough for Umbra to come online. On the other end of the comms, Ryan exhaled sharply. Understood. But if we're doing this, I'm leading the charge. Phil didn't argue. He knew Ryan was right. No one was better suited for the job. Then make it count, Captain. As Ryan's fighter squadron peeled away from the fleet, Dr. Charlie Lowell appeared on the bridge's central monitor, his face pale but determined. Behind him, the lab aboard the orbital station buzzed with frantic activity. Phil, Charlie said, his voice tight with urgency, Umbra systems are running diagnostics, but we're still hours away from full deployment. If you can't keep the swarm occupied, we'll keep them occupied, Phil assured him. Just be ready? Charlie nodded, though the worry in his eyes remained. The monitor blinked off, leaving Phil alone with his thoughts for a brief moment before the battle demanded his attention once more. On the edge of the solar system, the first wave of Earth's fighters met the swarm head-on. Ryan's voice came through the comms, calm and confident despite the chaos. Form up, stay tight. Pick your targets and make every shot count. The human fighters darted through the swarm's organic ships, their movements precise and unpredictable. Ryan's ship led the assault, weaving through bursts of green plasma and unleashing pinpoint railgun fire. He downed 3 enemy vessels in quick succession, but the swarm was relentless, adapting to their tactics with unsettling speed. On the Phoenix, Phil watched the battle unfold with a mixture of pride and dread. Humanity's ingenuity and determination were on full display, but the swarm was a force of nature, merciless, unyielding, and utterly alien. For every swarm vessel destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission, Harris said suddenly. It's from the Council. Phil's gaze snapped to the lieutenant. Put it through. The holographic image of Counselor Wazel flickered to life, his insectoid form visibly distressed. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by desperation. Humans, Wazel began, his voice trembling. We underestimated the swarm. Our fleet is lost. If you do not assist us, the galaxy will fall. Phil's lips pressed into a thin line. You brought this on yourselves. You lured the swarm here, thinking you could use us as bait. Wazel's mandibles clicked in frustration. We made a mistake, but this is no longer about your petty grievances. If the swarm conquers Earth, they will consume everything. Phil stared at the counselor for a long moment before speaking. You want our help? Then follow our lead. Any remaining council ships are to reinforce our left flank and target the swarm's command nodes. Do as I say, or you're on your own. Wazel hesitated, then nodded. Understood. The transmission ended, and Phil turned his attention back to the battle. The Council's surviving ships began moving to support Earth's fleet, their advanced weaponry providing a much-needed boost. But it wasn't enough. The swarm was still advancing, their numbers overwhelming. Sir, Harris said, his voice tinged with panic, the swarm's main force is breaking through. They'll reach Earth in minutes. Phil's mind raced. If they couldn't stop the swarm here, everything they'd fought for would be lost. But then he remembered Charlie's words. If Umbra isn't operational by the time they reach us, a plan began to form. Risky, but the only option. Harris, reroute all power to the fleet's kinetic shields. Prepare to initiate a full frontal assault on the swarm's core. The lieutenant blinked, startled. A full assault? Sir, will be. I know the risks, Phil said firmly, but we need to buy Charlie time. This is how we do it. The Phoenix surged forward, leading the charge as the remaining ships followed. Ryan's voice crackled through the comms. "Phil, what the hell are you doing?" "Giving humanity a chance," Phil replied. "Now to your job, Captain." As the fleet collided with the swarm, Earth's ships fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Explosions lit the darkness of space, and the swarm's once-coordinated assault began to falter. On the orbital station, Charlie worked frantically, his hands moving faster than thought as he pushed Umbra's systems to their limits. The minutes stretched into eternity, every second a struggle for survival. But then, finally, Charlie's voice came through the comms, strained but triumphant. "Umbra is online. Engaging now." The satellite grid activated, beams of concentrated energy lancing through space and tearing into the swarm's ranks. The tide of battle shifted in an instant, the swarm's forces scattering under the relentless assault. On the bridge of the Phoenix, Phil allowed himself a small, weary smile. They had done it. They had held the line. But the war was far from over. As the swarm retreated, Phil's gaze hardened. He knew they would be back, stronger and more prepared. "Send word to Earth," he said quietly. This was just the beginning. The skies above Earth were alive with the glow of the orbital grid, Project Umbra casting shimmering patterns over the surface below. Humanity had bought time, but survival was not victory. Phil Calloway stood in the war room of the Phoenix, surrounded by holographic projections of the solar system and its new, fragile balance. The swarm had been repelled, but not destroyed. They would return, and when they did, they would come with vengeance. Dr. Charlie Lowell's voice echoed across the chamber, calm but urgent. "Phil, Umbra is holding, but it's only a deterrent. The swarm scouts are already testing the grid. It's a matter of weeks before they evolve a countermeasure." Phil paced, his boots heavy against the steel floor. His mind was a storm of calculations and possibilities. "Then we don't wait for them to come back. We take the fight to them." Charlie blinked, startled. "You're suggesting an offensive? Against a species that thrives on adapting to its enemies?" Phil turned to face him, his gray eyes steely. "Exactly. They adapt to threats in real time, but what if we give them something they've never faced? A calculated strike where we control every variable. We hit their core worlds, their hive mind, and we do it before they can anticipate us." Captain Ryan Grant, leaning against the edge of the table, let out a low whistle. "You're talking about a suicide mission." Phil's lips twitched into the barest hint of a smile. "Not if we do it right." The plan came together in feverish bursts of energy. Humanity's greatest minds worked alongside council engineers, the grudging allies driven by mutual desperation. Maps of swarm territory were dissected, patterns in their movements studied for weaknesses. Charlie developed a new iteration of Umbra's AI, designed not just to counter the swarm's adaptability, but to predict it. Ryan led drills with hand-picked teams, pushing the limits of their endurance and precision. Every piece of the operation was meticulously crafted, each moment a gamble with everything at stake. Days turned into weeks as the fleet prepared. Phil stood in the hangar of the Phoenix, watching as technicians loaded the final payloads onto the ships. The weaponry was untested, a mix of experimental explosives and AI-guided missiles designed to disrupt the swarm's neural network. Failure wasn't an option, but the odds of success were slim. Ryan approached, his helmet tucked under his arm. "You're really coming with us, aren't you?" Phil nodded. "This fight isn't won from a command room. If we're asking people to risk everything, I need to be out there with them." Ryan chuckled, though his expression was grim. "You always didn't know how to make an impression." The fleet launched under the cover of Umbra's shield, the stars stretching into streaks of light as they entered faster-than-light travel. The journey to the swarm's central hive was perilous, their route skirting the edges of hostile systems. Every crew member knew the risks, but the weight of Earth's survival lent them strength. As they approached the hive world, the enormity of their task became clear. The planet loomed ahead, its surface pulsating with organic structures that seemed alive, breathing and growing in real time. Swarm vessels swirled around it in endless waves, their movements an eerie, synchronized dance. "Final checks," Phil ordered, his voice steady over the comms. "We only get one shot at this." Charlie's voice came through, calm despite the tension. "Weapons are armed and targeting systems are locked. The AI is running predictions, but it's not perfect. There's a 40% chance they'll adapt before we reach critical range." "That's a chance we'll take," Phil said. "All ships, prepare for descent." The fleet broke formation, diving toward the planet's surface. Swarm vessels swarmed to meet them, their organic forms twisting unnaturally as they engaged. Ryan's fighter squadron led the charge, weaving through bursts of plasma and retaliating with precision strikes. Phil's voice was a constant presence in the comms, directing movements and adjusting tactics in real time. The air grew thick with tension as the ships penetrated the planet's atmosphere. The surface below was a nightmare of churning biomass, the hive structures pulsing with unnatural light. Phil's hands gripped the controls tightly as the Phoenix descended, its weapon systems firing in synchronized bursts. "Target the neural nexus," Charlie instructed, his voice clipped. "If we disrupt the hive mind, the swarm will lose coordination." Phil's gaze locked onto the glowing core of the largest structure, its tendrils reaching out like veins across the surface. "Focus fire on that target," he ordered. "Ryan, clear us a path." "On it," Ryan replied, his voice grim but determined. His fighter darted ahead, drawing enemy fire as the larger ships lined up their shots. The first missile hit the Nexus, and the reaction was immediate. The entire hive seemed to convulse, a wave of energy rippling outward. Swarm vessels faltered, their movements becoming erratic. For the first time, the humans had the advantage. But the victory was short-lived. The swarm began to recover, their ships regrouping with terrifying speed. Phil's jaw tightened. "Charlie, what's the status of the final payload?" "Armed and ready," Charlie said. "But it has to be deployed manually." Phil didn't hesitate. "I'll do it." Ryan's voice cut through the comms. "Phil, don't be a damn hero. Let me." "No," Phil interrupted. "You're the best pilot we have. Get the fleet out of here." "That's an order." Before Ryan could protest, Phil disengaged from the controls, leaving the bridge in the hands of his second-in-command. He made his way to the ship's deployment bay, the final payload glowing ominously in its containment unit. The device was a prototype, designed to release an AI-driven virus that would disrupt the swarm's neural network permanently. If it worked, it would cripple the hive mind. If it didn't, humanity's last hope would die with him. The bay doors opened, revealing the chaotic battlefield below. Phil strapped into the deployment pod, his breath steady despite the pounding of his heart. He activated the comms one last time. "Charlie, make sure Earth is ready for the fallout." "Ryan, get them home. You'll need to lead what comes next." "Phil, don't do this," Ryan said, his voice breaking. "I already have," Phil replied. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and launched. The descent was a blur of fire and light, the pod hurtling toward the Nexus. Swarm vessels swarmed around him, but Umbra's predictive AI guided his path, evading their attacks with inhuman precision. The impact was seismic. The payload detonated at the heart of the Nexus, unleashing a wave of energy that rippled across the planet. The hive convulsed, its structures collapsing in on themselves. Swarm vessels plummeted from the sky, their movements erratic and lifeless. The neural network had been severed. On the Phoenix, Ryan watched the destruction in silence, his hands clenched into fists. Phil's voice was gone, but his sacrifice had given humanity a chance. Charlie's voice broke the silence. "It worked. The swarm it's over." Ryan exhaled, his eyes burning. "Then let's finish what he started." The fleet turned its weapons on the collapsing hive, erasing the remnants of the swarm in a final, vengeful barrage. As the last echoes of the battle faded, Earth's defenders knew the cost of their victory. But they also knew they had survived, and they would never stop fighting for the future Phil Calloway had died to protect.